Hello, my name is Greg, and this is my review of Euphoria, Building a Better Dystopia. This game was designed by Jamie Stagmeyer and Alan Stone. If I butchered either of your names, I do apologize. It was a Kickstarter game. Is that you are basically born and raised in this city that you felt was like a utopia, but actually ended up finding out as you grew older that it's really a dystopia, and there's all these corrupt factions trying to use the people and corrupt them and use for cheap labor and basically take advantage of its citizens. So as you've gotten older, you have decided that you'll hatch a master plan to take over by gaining influence over the various factions, using workers to your bidding, and trying to basically take advantage of the dystopia in hopes of building a better future and bringing what is a dystopia to a utopia. So let's get right into the gameplay. So here we have the basic setup for Euphoria. I'll give you a quick look at the board before I begin. So the way Euphoria works is you begin by setting up the board likewise. You basically, each player gets a set of influence tokens that are these stars that look kind of like this. There's 10 in each color. You also get a pair of dice that are in your own color and have special faces that represent numbers 1 through 6. You put 2 dice in the pool of potential workers that you can acquire per player and color of the players in a general pile. So I'm just putting them here for now. It doesn't really matter where you put them as long as they're near this section, because that's where you get the workers from. Sorry. Then you give each player a multiplication table. This is where you can keep track of resources without, if you run out of meeples or whatever. And you also gain 4 worker cards. The worker cards have a background like so. And each player gets 4 of those. Once you have gone 4 of these, you choose 2, place 1 face up, and put 1 face down. You can choose them per what you like. You can pick randomly the first time you play it. Doesn't really matter. Each one is unique, and each one has advantages and disadvantages. So for this particular demo, though, I'm going to just pick 2 at random and not really worry about what's what. Okay, I'll do the same thing for Team Blue. All right. Now that I've chosen my workers, I also get these dilemma cards, which on one side have a dilemma and on the other side have a reference sheet. You initially keep them face down and secret from other players, but of course you're allowed. Once all the players are ready with all their initial stuff, we want to double check and make sure the board is properly set up. So we have these resource tokens like this gas cloud, some oranges, some bricks, lightning bolts, gold, water, clay or rock, and we set them up on the board next to where you collect them. So, I mean, realistically, you can have them on the side of the board. You can have them pretty much anywhere you want. The instructions kind of indicate, and I like to put them next to where you can collect them. Just makes it easier. Then on these special influence territory markers, you put these little X's or pluses in order to cover up all the spots that are for players that are not playing. So in this case, we'll have 2 open because we have a 2-player game setup. If we're using 6 players, we wouldn't have any of these on there because there would be 6 slots. Also, the players will have a morale marker, which looks like a heart. Let's see if I can get a better shot of that. There you go. And a head/knowledge marker, that you set on 3, and the heart you set on 1. As the morale goes up, your hand size increases. As your knowledge goes up, your workers become more and more aware of the dystopia around them, and you will lose workers if that happens. So to begin the game, we also shuffle what these buildings icons are, these building construction sites. On the back, they have this blueprint-looking thing. On the front, they have a building, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But before we get there, you also want to set up your allegiance track here with these little diamond-shaped chits, and then there's a cardboard chit that goes on the first 2 tiers, and I'll explain all that in a little bit. So to begin the game, each player will roll their worker dice. Whatever they roll, whoever rolls the highest goes first. So in this case, blue got 6, a 4 and a 2, and black got a 4 and a 5 for 9, so black will naturally go first. Now, once you've rolled them, you don't want to re-roll them. These are the values of your workers. These represent their knowledge as well as contribute to certain locations. So, for example, black goes first. He might go on the generator in order to gain some resources. Depends on what he wants to do. So, first, I'm going to go over what the different locations do and why, and then why you'd want to do those things before I show you an example turn. So, for example, there are these locations here, which are here, 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 and here, that have this huge gray box with a solid gray line around them. This indicates a spot that more than one player can go to without having to bump anybody off. These spots are also the way where you get the various resources for your commodities like water, electricity, oranges, bliss, which is this gaseous-looking cloud, and depending on the number of people that are there, value of their dice, and the value of your dice, you get different resources. For each resource, if you have a 1 to 4, then you gain 1 of that resource, plus the alliance track moves up by 1. If you have 5 through 8 there, you gain 1 of their resource, and you lose 1 knowledge. At 9 plus, you gain 2 of the resource and 1 knowledge. So if a player is already here, and another player comes here, and you add those 2 dice together to determine which tier to get to. Some people might want a low tier, so you might put a low number there. Others might want more resources, but you risk knowledge. So, and then also there's these other locations like here, 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 there, and there, which are a little hard to see in the camera right now, but basically have a dotted line with an arrow. These are locations that indicate that if I go here, another player, including myself, can bump me out and replace my worker with their worker to gain the resources of this location. These locations, you don't need to bump anybody off because there's plenty of room. These locations here, which are to build buildings, you cannot bump people. They're solid gray lines. They require you to use resources in order to get in here in the first place, and you generally don't want to remove your guys until the building has been constructed. So those are the basics of the locations. There are also these locations here. There's 3 tunnels. There's the Euphoria tunnel, there's the Wasteland tunnel, and there is the Subterranean tunnel. What these tunnels are is just a kind of an example of various factions trying to leech into other factions to gain their resources. So, for example, the Subterraneans are all about, providing water, but they're trying to dig a hole towards Wasteland so they can get oranges without having to go to the Wasteland farms and pick them up. The Euphorians are trying to kind of dig their way towards the Subterraneans to gain water for free, and the Wastelands are digging their way to the Euphorians to gain electricity for free. The Icarids, which are in the sky, they don't care about digging at all, so they pretty much don't have a tunnel. Instead, they have various locations that are already pre-built that allow you to gain various resources as needed. Now, once you have ready to begin, you would look at your cards as well to make sure that none of them apply. The face-down cards don't get revealed until either the tunnel is dug far enough that this faction reaches this marker here, which is has a picture of the back of this card with an arrow. If you do land there, anybody who has a subterranean face-down worker will then reveal that guy, and they can use their powers. Same thing on this track here, the alliance track. Once it reaches this 3rd tier, anyone who has a corresponding face-down faction member would reveal them at that point. There are no other times where where workers are revealed except for those times. Now, a lot of these workers are very powerful. So, for example, Maggie the Outlaw says when you retrieve workers, if all your workers you retrieve were subterranean, you gain a water or a stone. So, if you have anybody over here and you retrieve them, then you gain water or stone if they're all that. This other card I have is Ray the Foreman, which is not currently active, but he says when a market is constructed, you gain two morale if you helped, but otherwise you lose 2 knowledge. So if I were to use him, I would really want to be focusing on building buildings as early as possible, because knowledge is bad. I'll get to why. Jonathan the Gambler says when you draw an artifact, you may draw 3 artifacts instead and gain 1 knowledge. If you do, reveal those cards, keep only the matching cards from the draw and discard the rest. You may use this ability once per turn. So there's a risk involved, but you also gain more artifacts, which you may need to build or gain certain victory points. This one says, Esmond the Fireman, when you place a influence, then you may discard an artifact to gain electricity and either lose a knowledge or gain morale. So these are all really powerful game-changing cards that you have to be very careful when you choose them in the beginning of the game, because it's going to be a very long time, if ever, that you gain more. So with that said, that gives you guys a little bit of an overview of the beginning of the game. So now, the way this game works is I'll take one of my workers, since I'm going first as black player, and I'll say I put him on the generator. Now, he has a 5, so I would look on the chart here, and it says 5 through 8. I gain 1 electricity, and I lose 1 knowledge. This is good, because it means that my workers are less self-aware of what's going on around them. Now, blue player would then go, and blue player also kind of wants to follow suit. He doesn't really want to gain knowledge yet, so he puts his 2 here, and will gain 1 lightning bolt, because now the value is 7, which is still through 5 through 8. He gains 1 lightning bolt and loses 1 knowledge. Next, we'll say black goes again. Now black wants to trade in that lightning bolt for some gold, because he's interested in building some buildings. So he takes a gold piece after trading in the lightning bolt. Blue wants to do the same thing, because they're like, hey, black seems to know what he's doing. Let's swap him out. So he bumps me. That's the term. And then once he bumps me, I roll the dice, and I got a 5. Now this worker's knowledge is 5. Now I compared that 5 with my knowledge here on the track, which is a 2. That gives me a total of 7. So I'm safe, because I need a 16 or more in order to lose a worker. Now when you roll, the important thing to remember is only the available workers, meaning the ones that are not on the board, count towards this 16 limit. And if it does hit 16, I lose the highest value die. And I lose that back to the pool, which then I can recruit later. So you don't really lose them permanently or anything. And now it's Black's turn again. Black has a 5 still, so he's going to come over here, and he's going to start building this building by trading in 1 gold. So now he's putting a little pressure on blue, because he's saying, hey, blue, if I get to if I take up 2 slots, we build this building, and you're kind of SOL. So blue will have an option of trying to, kind of hurry suit, or is he going to not care and do other things? And we'll get to in a bit why constructing marketplaces are very important. But the point is that this guy cannot be bumped. He's permanently there unless I remove him. Also, keep in mind is that with 2 players, you need to have 2 of these slots filled to build a location. With 3 or 4 players, you need to have 3 slots built. With 5 to 6, you have to have all 4 slots built, covered. And you can also cover multiple slots, so you can easily exclude people in the building. So let's speed up to that point. So now blue would have to take their guys back. Now, if you look at this chart here, he can either pay 1 orange or 1 bliss and gain 2 morale and get as many guys back as he wants, or he loses morale but gains the guys back anyways. Now, there's no morale to lose, so he's going to go ahead and choose that. Takes the 2 back because he has no other choice. He rolls the 2 dice, gets a 5, looks at the chart here, 2 and 5. He's good. His morale doesn't go down because there's 1 already. So now, at this point, blue is concerned that black is going to take over with the building, so he's going to go over here with his highest value, which is 3. He's going to gain 1 orange. And, oops, sorry. I forgot to trade in my gold. And then it's going to advance this track here. Sorry, that's the wrong one. This track here by 1. Now, if this track reaches tier 2, then this orange comes over here. And basically what happens is anytime someone goes to the farm, they permanently get 1 extra orange per a level. So you get 2 for the first tier, 2 for the second tier, and 3 for the third tier. Also to keep in mind with that one is that this tier, these will move up every time you do a 1 to 4 on the corresponding resources, which is the bliss, oranges, lightning, or water. But they also move up when you go over here and spend 3 artifacts, or random ones, or 2 of the exact same kind, to put a star or an influence on this area here, which is the territory. And then that will also move the track up. Otherwise, the track doesn't move very quickly. But you'll see that, like, as the game progresses, those tracks will start moving up fairly quickly, especially if someone focuses on them. If it ever reaches the 3rd tier, then this chit, which is on the 3rd tier, goes to the corresponding tunnel. Now, when you're at a tunnel, we'll say blue came over this tunnel, right, like we did for the gold. Oh, I forgot to move this guy. So he would move 2. So every time you go to this tunnel area, right, you basically move the guy 1 whenever you do an action here. So if you were to trade an orange, you can get a brick or an artifact, and then he moves his guy down the track by 1. If this is here, because they've reached the 2nd tier, then anyone who goes here can gain both brick and artifact at the same time for 1 action. If this guy ever reaches this 3rd to last spot on any of these tracks, then anybody who has a worker who is affiliated with that particular group, the Subterraneans, the Euphorians, or the Wastelanders, then they get revealed. So this guy has a Euphorian, so he would have revealed that at that point. Same thing with this player. So if basically this guy reached here, they would both reveal their pawns, even though they didn't necessarily move that guy. Also, if it reaches the 4th tier of the Alliance track, same thing happens. You reveal your workers who are part of that faction. And then if it ever reaches the last tier, anyone who has a worker who is affiliated with those guys would then get, you can put your influence marker on their card, which then gives you 1 step closer to victory. So let's talk about the buildings, because buildings are extremely important. Now, if, however, if blue had come here and, let's say, traded in a brick, then you would construct this building. The two workers go back to their players, who then will roll, verify knowledge and everything. Okay, we're good. Great. And then you flip over this building. Now, the building is comprised of 2 things. On the upper part, you can see it has resources that you need to spend. On the bottom part, it has a penalty. I know it's a little hard to see in this camera, but the penalty on this one says you may not use pairs of artifacts at artifact markets. So they basically affect anybody who did not construct these buildings. And the way you tell is by, when you do construct this building, you place one of your influence markers on the building itself to say, hey, I helped construct this building. Anyone who didn't, so let's say there was a 3rd player, they would not be able to use 2 artifact cards of the same kind to place a thing here. However, if a player does go here and spends the required resources and they place their star there, it is as if wrong star. It is as if they had already built these buildings, so the penalties no longer apply to them, and also they gain a star on the board. So as the game progresses, these buildings become more and more valuable. Like, you may not place more than 1 worker per turn if you get penalized, so that's pretty bad, because if you roll doubles, you can't place more than 1 worker. If you may not use your recruits for special abilities, that's pretty harsh. So these can be like, these are really big game changers. So generally, you want to build buildings at least with the other players, because you never know what the penalty is. Like, this one says you can't use buildings that you haven't constructed. This one says every time you roll a 2, you use a random resource or commodity. This one is you gain a knowledge when you place a star. So yeah, so generally you want to either have your influence on the territories or on the buildings themselves. Buildings are really easy to get, as long as you get there quick enough, they're pretty easy to get your stars on. While these require a lot more resources and a lot more time. Now, to get more workers, you would have to, on a turn, when you're placing a guy, you have to place him on one of these two locations here. This location requires 3 water, and this location requires 3 electricity. The general theme idea here is that by going here, for example, you get 3 water, you're splashing your workers in the face and waking them up, therefore you gain 2 morale, because they're like, oh, that was refreshing, I feel great. If you go here, you spend 2 electricity, you like electrocute them awake, and then they basically become less aware of their surroundings due to shock, or something along those lines. But that's how you get your workers from the pool into your pile. Now, when you get every time you gain a worker, you roll the die, and you compare the knowledge with all available workers. And if you are less than 16 on your next turn, you get to place that worker. Now, as I said before, there is one exception that if I roll combinations, like here I rolled 3 1s, like this, and a 3. So now what I can do is I can actually place these 3 workers on my turn rather than having to do it one by one. So in this case, like, that could be a huge advantage, because if you have resources to build buildings, you might just dominate buildings, or you might go and gather a bunch of resources. From what I understand, these resources can't run out, which is why you have this multiplier card. So every time you gain a resource, you would put it on the card, and then if let's say these are getting low, you might put like 1 on the 3 and say like, okay, I have 3 bliss, and then instead of trading it in, you just move it down the multiplier. Now going back to the dilemma. So the dilemma card on the back has a choice. And it also has a requirement. So this card, for example, says, help a friend escape. If you do that, you draw 2 recruits and keep 1. The other choice is turn a friend in. If you do that, you gain 1 influence on this card. This requires you to have balloons, which is an artifact, or 2 random artifacts to be able to do that. And you can do that at any point during your turn. The idea here is that it's more of a thematic thing where are you going towards Dystopia or are you going more towards Utopia? And whichever one you choose, that's the only one you can do permanently for the rest of the game. So choose wisely, as they say. The same thing with this guy. He has the exact same choices, except this choose true love versus accept an assigned match. He has a teddy bear as a requirement or 2 random artifacts, but either one he chooses is the exact same result. So the game keeps going until one player has put 10 of their, has basically put all 10 of their stars out on the board or on cards. Yeah, or like you know, if they put on the dilemma cards or any of the workers that match on the board. But once one player has put all their 10 stars out, the game ends and that player wins. If in the event of a tie, like a building was built and both players put the stars on it and they both ran out at the same time, there are a couple of rules about tiebreakers because there can't be a tie at the end of the game. The other thing is once these workers reach the end of the tunnel, these things are covered here. They get removed because these spaces are now accessible. So as long as the tunnel worker reaches the end of their respected tunnels, these places now become available. Now, for these places to be used, you have to have a worker card that matches that faction. So, for example, the black player has a Euphorian and it has a Subterranean. So the black player would be able to put a guy here and a guy here. But he would not be able to put one here because I don't have a Wasteland. Blue has a Euphorian and a Subterranean as well. So basically no one would be able to use the Wasteland Tunneler to gain 3 electricity for free. But anybody who goes there or here gains 3 orange or 3 water as a way of being able to gain more resources quickly. Yeah, so buildings, they're pretty much the same thing, except for these require more things. Like this one requires 4 oranges and 1 gold. If you go here and you use that ability, then you gain 1 influence on the territory, as well as you move the alliance track up 1. So a lot of times people will rush to do these things to fill up this territory with their pieces so nobody else can kind of jump in. You can still use these locations if you want to further the alliance track, even if the stars are full. These permanent buildings, as I mentioned before, are ways for people who weren't part of the construction to be able to also utilize those resources, especially if, for example, this building is built where it says that you can't use buildings you didn't construct. But also, and then once you use this location to have a star in the territory, it is as if you had built one of those buildings, and the penalties no longer apply to you, which is a really big thing. Up here we have these 3 locations for the Icarus, which this one here is you spend 3 of any resource, and you gain 1 influence on the territory, and you also move the alliance marker up 1. Here you spend any commodity, and any commodity, which is the bliss or the lightning bolts or the oranges, while the resources are more like bricks, gold, and stone. So you spend any one of these plus a bliss, and you move the alliance track up, plus gain 2 artifact cards. On this location here, you spend 1 commodity of your choice, of random. It can be random, it can be of your choice, doesn't matter. And 1 bliss, you move the alliance track up 1 and gain 2 commodities of your choice. So the Icarus ones are pretty powerful in the long run. So it's pretty good to have alliances with them, or just better yet, just to be able to utilize them. Now, if at any point your knowledge is really high and you roll, so here I have a knowledge of 6, and I rolled a 5, 4, 7, 12. So I have 18. That's 16 or more. So now I have to lose a worker. So I look for the worker with the highest value. In this case, it's a 5, and I place them back in the pool. And now I basically continue my turn as normal. And the important thing there is that I can get that guy back eventually, but I'm at a disadvantage because I've lost a guy. And that's pretty much Euphoria in a nutshell. You go around, you take turns, you go around placing your guys. And, you know, one of the things here is it doesn't really matter what the turn order is after a while, because you're going to be bumping, because the bumping effect allows you to basically go places that someone else might have taken over. It's only really on constructing buildings and where basically you have these permanent resources, like you have to spend a gold to go there or a brick, and you can't bump people out. These are really the only places that I can kind of see being important turn order wise, but there's enough diversity in them that you can pretty much get there as long as you plan ahead, because there is possible that you could get blocked out. So that is the only thing I could think of where turn order might matter a little bit, but otherwise turn order didn't really matter that much. Okay, let's go on to the conclusion. Okay, so that's how Euphoria works in a nutshell. So overall, I love this game. I think they did a fantastic job. The artwork is fantastic. The board is beautiful. The buildings are really gorgeous. The components are really cool. I did start this game, and I did get the deluxe version, so I'm not sure what is the difference between the deluxe and the non-deluxe version. It could be that these resource tokens are not as cool. They might be just cardboard or regular chits. I know that the stars, they had cardboard ones in the box, so I'm not sure if that's a deluxe version or not. But if you can't get your hands on the deluxe version, I highly recommend you do. If you can't, the basic version one should be good enough. The game is really, really fun. I really like the mechanics of bumping players out of spots. There's lots of worker placement games I played where someone goes into a spot that you wanted to go to, and then you're screwed because you didn't really have a contingency plan, or there might be another spot that's not quite as good, or whatever reason, you're now kind of like, oh great, what do I do now? And then either you have to suffer paralysis, be like, oh, what am I gonna do? Oh, I need to figure this out, and then you spend too much time worrying about what you're supposed to do now versus just keep playing. And so by being able to bump another player off of a spot keeps you in the game, keeps you playing, and allows the player to get their worker back early, which also kind of helps them. Also, building these buildings and having them like with resources that only one person can use at a time makes it really, really challenging. Because if I pick up a brick, for example, and I want to build a building that has 1 brick and a bunch of gold, I have to make sure that I either grab a gold or get there before anyone else. Because if someone else takes that brick, then I'm kind of SOL. Also, the kind of alliance tracking, I like that concept a lot. I know that some people have had issues with secret alliances, but I don't really care about that. That actually added a lot to this game. And it's not really that critical to the game, and it doesn't really unbalance the game in any way majorly that I saw. So I like it, and I didn't think it was a problem. Also, being able to build buildings and having people take penalties if they don't construct those buildings also is, I think, is a pretty cool idea. There aren't many worker placement games I've played or I've seen that use dice and value dice. I know Alien Frontiers does, and Alien Frontiers is a great game. It's very thematic. It does a really good job of making a fun thematic game, but it also has a problem of somebody went to a location and screwed me over concept. It has issues where you can get an extra ship. Only one person can do that per turn, which gives them a huge advantage in the game. So I feel like that game, while I really do like it, has a lot of mechanics that allow for someone to basically get ahead or screw over another player, really with an unfair advantage, and there's not much you can do about it. In this game, I feel like they did a lot to basically prevent that from happening while still giving advantages to players that do that. So, like, for example, if you go to a location and get bumped, the advantage is that you get your worker back for free without having to take any penalties. A player who who bumped you gets the spot, sure, and they get to utilize it, but now their worker's locked in there. So I feel like that's a cool kind of trade. Like, hey, I help you out by helping myself, but I'm also taking the risk that you're going to now have a bigger advantage because you don't take any penalties for getting your guys back. So when you get your guys back, you either have to lose one morale because if you don't, you have to either pay an orange or a bliss, and then you gain 2 morale. But then you can get any combination of guys back, 1 or all. So the penalties are not extreme, but it's still better to get bumped off, and you can even bump your own guys off. And the advantage there is that you get a guy back, but you get to do the action again, because once you place a guy on a location, obviously you only do the action once. So I gave this game a solid 9 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed it. I was borderline between 9 and 10 because I thought it was a very, very good game, and I love the artwork. The double-sided board is really cool, where the back is all black and white, and it makes you feel like it's kind of an old 1920s, 1930s movie that you're interacting with. It has colors for the different locations, but the black contrast makes it really cool. And if you get the game, you should definitely check it out. I would show you right now, but the board is kind of covered with stuff. But anyways, if you haven't had a chance to play this game, I recommend you do. It's a great game. It was very well designed. I'm really looking forward to seeing what more games this company and these two guys come out with, and I hope that they do a lot more, because this game is great. I really also think that they could expand this game. You could add more factions to kind of try to align with. They could add more worker combinations, definitely more artifacts, more resources. I mean, there's definitely expandability to this game, but even with that said, there's so many buildings already in the game, and you only use 6 of them, that you could probably play this game a bunch of times before you get too much repetition. And every game you play is going to be different combinations of buildings, so you never really know what to predict. So, thank you. That was my review of Euphoria. So, does this belong on your shelf, or is there room for it? Yes, I would say absolutely. This game adds a lot to the overall feel and place of a worker placement game. There's not too many games like it, which is what I like about it. There's a lot of worker placement games out there. Puerto Rico is a great one. There's a bunch that I haven't played. There's some that I really don't like Stone Age, where I found extremely boring. This game, it wasn't boring. Even in between turns, you're thinking ahead, like, what am I going to do? What am I gonna do? And because you don't have to worry about a player kind of taking over a spot that you wanted to, per se, then it really allows you to strategize and really think about your turns in advance, versus some games like Stone Age, where you think about your turn right before you go, because who knows what's going to change? Who knows if this location you want to go to is taken away from you? So that's a big plus for this game. The games like Alien Frontier, like I said in earlier, like, there's a lot of things in that game that are really cool, and it works really well, and it's a really good theme. But this game is more abstract than the theme. I think it works well for the theme, don't get me wrong, but you could easily retheme this game to a bunch of different things. It could be aliens, it could be a prison, factions that you're trying to gain influence with, it could be businesses, you're trying to do hostile takeovers of other companies, etc., etc. So it's really good. And if you like super thematic games, okay, so maybe not so much. Like, then this game is no Arkham Horror. It's not going to be dripping in theme, which I love, but it's going to be close enough that even someone who like me who loves thematic games will enjoy the game. It's not completely abstract. It's not like Raw or some other games that basically are a game with a theme slapped on it that have nothing to do with the theme, have no other than maybe like a couple of pictures, like really don't do anything. So I like this game a lot. I highly recommend it. Even if you have other worker placement games, I think there could be room on your shelf for this one because it's such a great game. If you have a worker placement game that is mediocre or you're not super happy with, you're like, it's okay, I want to play once in a while, get rid of that game and replace it with this one because this game you won't be disappointed. So thank you, and have a great day, great year, and I'll talk to you soon.